This week's episode of the TribCast is sponsored by the Texas Tribune membership program as we celebrate Amplify Austin. Hello and welcome to the Texas Tribune TribCast for March 4th, 2025. I'm Matthew Watkins, editor-in-chief of the Tribune. My two co-hosts, Eleanor Klibanoff and James Barragon, are nursing their Oscar party's hangover, aren't able to make it today. So instead, I am joined by Sherri Greenberg, a former state representative and professor of practice at the LBJ School of Government at the UT Austin. Hello, Sherri. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Hello.
So today we are going to be talking about a subject that you have been studying for several years now, many years, even before it became sort of the buzzword in the Texas Capitol and beyond.
That's right.
The idea of artificial intelligence and regulating it at the state level. When the idea of regulating businesses comes up in the legislature, there's usually a pretty strong consensus among Republicans to sort of stay out of the way in the name of growth and free enterprise. But the conversation this year around regulating AI is turning out to be a little bit more complex. You have powerful conservatives such as Senate Business and Commerce Chairman Charles Schwertner and the chair of the House DOGE Committee, Giovanni Capriglione, carrying bills that would impose strong guardrails and rules for the technology. But they're finding some opposition from members of their own party. Senator Lois Kolkhorst was questioning a bill by Schwertner last week. Tech impresario Joe Lonsdale has really come out against some of the legislation, despite being pretty usually aligned with Republicans in the state. It's a fight that sort of avoids that partisan breakdown, but I think there's some fear kind of driving both sides. On one hand, you have lawmakers worried about the dangers of AI on people's privacy, their freedom, and the possibility that really important decisions might be made by computers, not people. On the other side, you have folks who are worried about going too far in restricting AI that would leave Texas behind other states in the technology and maybe even pulling the United States with them behind adversaries like China.
Right.
So, Sherri, you, like I said, have been watching this for a very long time. A lot of the focus so far earlier on this session is on a major bill called TRGA, the Texas Responsible AI Governance Act. Can we start by just having you explain what's in that bill?
Sure. And for background, what you really alluded to is what I call the promise and peril of AI, right? There's great promise with AI, with artificial intelligence in healthcare, detecting diseases that we wouldn't be able to. But there's peril too. So if we again use healthcare as an example, big privacy issues. And we also talk about balancing innovation with rules and policies and regulations that provide transparency, accountability, and guard against invasion of privacy. And so that's really what we're dealing with here. And with artificial intelligence, we do find that there are a lot of common concerns across political parties, and sometimes you find alliances that you wouldn't elsewhere, and you also alluded to that. So with TRGA, this is a bill that was filed. It's House Bill 1709 by Representative Giovanni Capriglione. And there was a lot of discussion about this bill over the interim. He had a very large stakeholder group that many of us participated in meetings and whatnot. And I think he knew that this is a bill that would have a lot of discussion once it was filed.
Right.
So TRGA is really a bill that's based on risk mitigation. And this is what the EU bill really is based on, and also other states such as Colorado, which we can look to. And it's mitigating against risk, which is also what NIST, the National Institute for Standards, has really set out in its framework, which is part of the National Science Foundation. So TRGA would create obligations for developers and deployers of any AI system that is a contribution, decisions relating to employment, finance, healthcare. Texas would also be the first state to require high-risk AI system distributors to take reasonable care. The bill would ban AI systems that pose unacceptable risk. Private litigants would have limited right of action. The law would require generative AI developers to keep detailed records of data sets used to train. it would exempt many small businesses. So you can see it's very much a risk-based system. It is also a bill that very much focuses on what we call algorithmic discrimination. And in the bill, that means any condition in which an artificial intelligence system, when deployed, creates an unlawful discrimination of a protected classification in violation of the laws of this state or federal law. And then it further goes on, because you're wondering, well, what's an artificial intelligence system, right? That means the use of machine learning and related technologies that use data to train statistical models for the purpose of enabling computer systems to perform tasks normally associated with human intelligence. And this is really where we get into the AI, the artificial intelligence realm, or perception, such as computer vision, speech, or natural language processing and content generation.
Okay, so there's a few things that are sort of key phrases in this bill, one of which you already mentioned, high-risk AI systems. What do we mean by a high-risk system in this case?
So a high-risk system in this bill, and again, this bill is really based on risk mitigation. High-risk artificial intelligence system means an artificial intelligence system that is a substantial factor in a consequential decision. The term, though, does not include an artificial system if the artificial intelligence system is intended to detect decision-making patterns or deviation from prior decision-making patterns and is not intended to replace or influence a previously completed human assessment without sufficient human review. So the following technologies, unless the technologies, when deployed, make or a substantial factor in making a consequential decision: anti-malware, antivirus, calculation, cybersecurity, databases, data storage, firewall, internal domain, the list goes on and on.
So those are things that are not included in the bill. But what we're really talking about here are basically using AI, using computers to make kind of important, impactful decisions about customers or people in this state.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think the other interesting thing is the idea of using reasonable care, right? This idea that if essentially it's up to the developers, the people, like OpenAI or Twitter's developing some AI systems and things like that, or even the distributors or the deployers, the people who are, utilizing an AI system to evaluate, whatever it is they might do, make decisions about healthcare, health insurance, and things like that. What it's basically saying is that they need to take steps that are done reasonably to protect people from that kind of discrimination in the system. Is that right?
That is exactly right. And there is a kind of, I guess, provision, you would say, for piloting, with a sandbox where there can be some innovation taking place.
Okay, very good. And so, I mean, what's interesting here, this is the bill that's gotten a lot of attention. It'll be interesting to see whether it advances in its current form, and we can talk about that a little bit more. But what's really struck me about this is there was a lot of conversation, when ChatGPT was really out there, a lot of conversation about the dangers of AI. A lot of those felt like sort of conversations around existential dangers for humanity, right? Are the computers going to take over?
Yes, that's sentient, and they're not sentient.
Exactly. And that's not really what this is protecting about. This is more about privacy concerns. Are AI, basically things without a conscience going to be making, life or death or, major financial decisions for the lives of people in Texas? Is that right?
Yes, this is not about whether AI is, as we say, sentient, right? It is about looking at those areas that people are most concerned about when they talk about AI: protecting their privacy, having transparency, having accountability, knowing when, AI is being used. The bill, requires as we said, an unacceptable risk. It prohibits systems that, without express consent, identify emotions, capture biometric intent, those attributes that we're really sensitive about as people in this atmosphere. It also would require generative AI developers to keep detailed records of data sets that they use to train. So the bill, again, going back to the NIST framework, really looks at risk and risk management and some of those perils that we talk about. The risk management framework looks at govern, map, measure, and manage. And that is a framework that has been used by NIST, really by the EU, by Colorado, and other states. Now, that's not to say that everyone is happy about it, right? And really, with AI, we can go back to 1950 with Alan Turing, right? AI has been with us a long time and in our daily lives. But until ChatGPT appeared on the scene, people weren't really cognizant about it.
Right.
Once people became cognizant, then it's, oh, what does this mean for my privacy, my data? Is there transparency? Do I know when AI is being used? However, there is this, as I said, promise and peril, or this issue of how do we have innovation, right, without too much risk? As you mentioned, people are concerned if this stifles innovation, where will that mean for us as a state? We know that we're getting ready to have some big investments in this state, right, in AI. What would that mean for the country? You mentioned China, and of course, we've heard a lot about China and AI recently. But on the other hand, people really are concerned about, I would say, their privacy and about this algorithmic discrimination in decision making, and also other areas. There are other bills, of course, that have been filed dealing with using AI for mental health or using AI in making decisions with insurance and healthcare. So there are other concerns that people have.
Yeah, and it seems like would you say the broad kind of theme of a lot of these bills is sort of designed from a kind of consumer protection standpoint?
Yes, I would say it is designed from a consumer protection and transparency standpoint. The bills, they may say, well, you can use it for mental health, but there has to be a provider involved. Keeping the human in the loop, I would say. When you're looking at health insurance, you have to disclose perhaps that you're using AI, and you have to, if it's for specialty care, a specialist, for instance, has to review it. So consumer protection, transparency, and accountability, and kind of, I would say, keeping that human in the loop.
It's interesting because in some ways this feels like a very familiar kind of conversation between innovation and industry and job creation and all those kinds of things, and the consumer protection, the fears about the negative impacts of this technology. And I find it a little bit striking that we're seeing at least a significant segment of the Republican Party sort of going in the direction of consumer protection this time around. What do you think it is that's different about AI that's setting up this conversation?
Well, certainly. I think that there are a lot of legislators who have followed the path that, for instance, social media took, and lack of privacy with data. And they're feeling that this is a big concern of their constituents. And seeing now with AI, your data, your personal data is being used to train it, for instance. Your personal data may be available. You may not know when it's being used. It may, is it making decisions without a human in a loop? And I think that those are issues that, they're beyond party boundaries, and that many constituents across the board are very concerned with these issues, and concerned with I would say, the path, for instance, that data and social media has taken with, lack of privacy, and now seeing AI.
Yeah, I mean, among the things in this TRGA bill, it bans deep fakes, and certain use of biomarkers
That's
like
right.
facial recognition, that, they don't want people pulling a bunch of pictures from Facebook to be able to identify your face, wherever you are walking across the street. Another thing it bans is social scoring, which I'm quoting from the MIT Technology Review, the definition of that: a practice in which authoritarian governments, specifically China, rank people's trustworthiness and punish them for undesirable behaviors, such as stealing or not paying back loans.
Right.
Essentially, it's seen as a sort of way to rank citizens or identify citizens as types of risk. And that kind of, I think, another big part of the Republican Party is freedom, right? And they're worried a little bit about surveillance and just, whether it's big companies or the government itself sort of, reaching into the personal lives in a way that feels uncomfortable to them.
That's right. It's that privacy issue. They're very concerned about you not knowing your data is being used, you not knowing that your face is being used, the biometric markers, your voice being taken. There was a case in Arizona over a year ago, a really horrible situation, and there was legislation in the Arizona legislature where there was a deep fake of a young woman's voice, and it was her voice, and they called her mother, and her younger sister was there too, and said that she had been kidnapped, asking for ransom. Well, in fact, she had not been kidnapped, and that was not her voice, but it was a replica, let's say, of her voice, a deep fake. So there are a lot of concerns, I think, about criminal elements, about privacy, and as you said, about freedom. My freedom to walk down the street without being, ranked as a threat to society, or my freedom to control how my image and likeness and voice is being used.
All right. Today's TribCast is presented by the Texas Tribune Membership Program. The Texas Tribune's in-depth coverage of Texas politics relies on donations from people like you. Right now, your donation to support this reporting goes twice as far, thanks to a $15,000 match for Amplify Austin Day. Support independent journalism by making a donation online today. Okay, so I want to ask you a little bit about just the state's ability to succeed in this process.
Sure.
Right? We saw after this bill came out, Joe Lonsdale, who I mentioned sort of in the opening, a venture capitalist, a very influential one, both politically and in the tech world, came out very strongly against this TRGA bill. He said
he did.
Kill innovation, kill jobs, let China win the AI race. He essentially argued that it would create a new AI governing agency in Texas and cede the regulation of AI to, bureaucrats, the dreaded bureaucrats. Tell me a little bit about the industry response to this measure.
Sure. And it's not, you mentioned his statements, but he's not the only one. There were articles, I think, in Forbes. There was an opinion piece in, I believe, the Dallas Morning News last week.
Yeah,
right?
If you Google TRGA, all the top links are industry-aligned groups with articles and other things kind of speaking out against this bill.
There was another article, everything is bigger in Texas. TRGA is no exception, but will it, provide accountability? So, and they're saying, no, it wouldn't. And so anytime that you file a significant bill, having spent 10 years in the legislature myself, I can tell you that it's a starting point. And you're going to expect that there will be changes, that there will be amendments. And with a bill like this, even though there was a stakeholder group and a lot of input, I think the bill that's filed, I think it's safe to say, probably is not going to be the final piece of legislation. And so we take it as a starting point. And certainly there is this concern about innovation. We're in another industrial revolution. And with every industrial revolution, whether you say we're in the fourth or fifth or whatever, we have seen concerns about the perils of the new technology, but also the promise. And there are concerns, with AI about work and future of work, for instance. Will people be out of jobs, or will there be new jobs? And we can look back at history and see this. So I think there is a real issue here with balancing innovation and protecting people's freedom and privacy and having that transparency, and that when you file a bill like this, you can expect that there will be some amendments.
Right, absolutely. Lonsdale, after he put out a little sort of a tweet thread against this, he came back not too long later, said he met with, quote, relevant leaders in Texas, and that they agreed, again, I'm quoting him, conservatives must block the creation of AI regulatory agencies. So I think, you're exactly right. It sounds like there's going to be some resistance to some of these ideas here.
Right.
I want to talk a little bit about enforcement here. So the bill, as it's currently laid out, would place enforcement in the hands of the Attorney General's
That's
office.
correct.
Organizations that violate the rules in that would be subject to fines in the like $10,000 range per instance. But of course, we know that a lot of these things are done on a mass scale, so those $10,000 fines can really add up. I mean, you may remember the Attorney General's lawsuit against Facebook for use of facial recognition. Again, it was one of those individual fines, but those individual fines ended up adding up to $1.4 billion worth of settlements. So you could really see some aggressive actions related to this. But I mean, one of the things I wonder about as I read this bill is the Texas state government isn't exactly known for being technologically advanced in how it goes about things. I mean, the computer systems, all those types of things.
Well, there is another bill that calls for training of certain employees on cybersecurity and artificial intelligence.
Well, there you go. I mean, does Texas have the capacity to regulate this, do you think, even if a bill like this were to be passed?
The Attorney General's office, as you said, would be the enforcement mechanism, not the Department of Information Resources. Does it have the capacity? I think that depends on who are the employees and what training do they have. And as I said, I think that is incredibly important. Having, of course, the systems in place, but also the training of state employees.
Okay. And so the other thing here to be thinking about is just, again, that debate. I mean, this is going on in a lot of different ways. I think one conversation is, do you do this in a piecemeal approach with individual, here's an AI healthcare bill, here's an AI education bill, and all those types of things. There are a lot of different measures about that. But even when you get into the individual cases, it can get a little bit dicey when you go into the details. There was a conversation in the Senate Business and Commerce Committee last week. Charles Schwartner filing a bill that would ban health insurers from using AI to deny treatment or downcoding patients' treatment. He argued pretty passionately against the idea, I'm quoting here, that insurers are, quote, deploying AI that is focused on their bottom line, in my opinion, over, patient well-being, basically. But Lois Kolkhorst, another very conservative senator, came right back at it and said, this bill could cost billions of dollars to the state, right? That we have, Medicaid programs and things like that might be able to use AI to root out fraud or identify inefficiencies and things like that. And I understand that there's fears, but there's also real opportunities here for AI.
We get back to the promise and the peril again. Right. Exactly. And this has been a national issue. You've probably seen some headlines nationally about insurers using AI and were they relying solely on an algorithm to deny coverage and insurance, particularly for specialty care. And there have been several bills filed, as I mentioned, dealing with healthcare, with mental health, and with health insurance. And I think the question will be, do you have a bill that denies the use of AI completely? Or do you have a bill that says you can use AI, but as I said, you have to have a human in the loop. A human has to review it. And, there are other bills that have been filed that say, well, you can use AI. However, if it's specialty care, the specialist, for instance, has to review it. So you keep that human in the loop. And a lot of what we're seeing around the country and around the world is that discussion of whether it's in domestic violence cases in Spain, where you had a situation where a particular police department was relying solely on AI, predictive analysis, to say whether an abuser would abuse again, and there was not a human in the loop, and a woman ended up dying. And so a lot of the conversation now has turned to using it, but ensuring that a human makes the final decision and is reviewing. So I think it's this discussion of, where are you on this continuum? Do you not use it at all? Do you use it and you solely rely on the AI? Or are you somewhere in the middle on this continuum where you use it, but you must have humans and professionals who are in the loop and who are reviewing and making the final decision?
How important is it that the legislature figure out some answers to that question this session? I mean, one of the challenges of the Texas legislature is they only meet every 2 years.
That's right.
At the pace that technology is growing and changing, is this sort of their last chance to sort of put down a marker on this, do you think?
Well, I think that's why you have seen so many bills filed this session. As you said, technology is changing as we are doing, as we are talking right now, right?
Right.
And with the biennial legislature, you do have limited opportunities. And again, with ChatGPT, with what we've seen with health insurance and others, yes, I think that there are many members across the board who feel that it is important this session to get a handle on this and pass some legislation.
Okay. I mean, my other question is the state level the right level to be doing this, right? I mean, a lot of this this AI deployment will be happening outside the state, but affecting Texans, but it also affects, Californians and Vermonters and everywhere else. I mean, should this not be a federal level discussion as opposed to a state level?
Well, or should it be a worldwide,
Right.
I mean, technology does not know boundaries, right? And this is a really good question because, as we know, federal law supersedes state laws, and state laws supersede local laws. So the city of Austin has been looking at policies and looking closely at what's happening with TRGA. They want to, align. They have common issues and concerns, for instance. But what you tend to see is when you don't have action at the federal level, so we have had no congressional action, and the Biden executive order, of course, no longer exists.
Right.
And so when you don't have action at the federal level, and legislators have constituents, and if those constituents have concerns, what you see is there's this vacuum, and you will see the states, not just Texas, step in. And if constituents at the local level have concerns, right, and the states are not stepping in, you will see individual cities step in. And then you will see industry say, wait a minute, we have this patchwork of different cities within the state or different states, right? I think that what happens in a Texas is very important, whether it's textbooks or AI, right, regulation, because we have a very large population here in the state, right? And so that's important, whether it's Texas or California or Florida, New York. And you do see this kind of alignment of states who have already passed or are considering around this NIST model, the one that the EU's used, the one that Colorado used, around mitigating risk.
Okay. And what about just, there's other aspects to this too, which is trying to attract, while you're thinking about how you regulate it, you're also trying to attract companies and developers into this state. I mean, Joe Lonsdale is an example of that.
Yes,
someone who came from California to Texas. There's been a lot of activity recently. You saw Apple make an announcement of a development data center in Houston. Facebook bringing their content moderation staff here. I mean, particularly after Trump won the election,
data centers.
Exactly. There seems to be a lot of interest in bringing folks here. But that creates its own challenges, not just in terms of how you regulate it, but also how do you build up the infrastructure to support it. Let's talk a little bit about the power grid and how that factors into this.
Yes, certainly we've heard a lot about the power grid in Texas over the past few years. We seem to every winter be having some very cold weather at
Mhm,
times,
mhm.
and we know that we have our own grid now. There's discussion about some connectivity with another grid, but we'll put that aside for
Right.
the moment. Texas has its own power grid, and it's not just power; it's water. So these data centers, whether they're being used for AI or crypto, right,
Mhm.
use an enormous amount of power and an enormous amount of water, and they're noisy,
Right.
right? And so there are concerns about the power grid, and will there be the capacity, and should there be requirements for some of these data centers to have their own source of power, mini nuclear or other sources that people are talking about. And what does it mean also for water? We know that this is a major session for water. And last session was too, a lot of
Mhm.
funding, but this is a really major session for water and water supply and distribution. And how does that fit in with the data centers? Because they also use a lot of water.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then there's one more aspect I want to talk about, which is how are we preparing, you know, our students, our future workforce for an AI world? Is that a topic that is being discussed in the Capitol as well?
Oh, absolutely. And it's a topic that I have spent a
Yeah.
lot of time on the
Mhm.
past years and continue to. I think that learning begins, the day you're born, and
Yeah.
it ends the day you leave this earth.
Right.
And that it's very important that we be cognizant, starting in elementary school all the way through people's PhDs, that they have the appropriate curriculum related to AI.
Mhm.
Is coding going away? Well, it's coding at a different level.
Mhm.
I think that it's very important that we focus on our students and the residents being continuous learners,
Mhm.
having critical thinking skills, having people skills, being able to write, and continuous learning. And that we look at jobs where they may need new training,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
As we say, upskilling or reskilling, and that this be part of our curriculum in an appropriate manner
Mhm.
throughout education and beyond, whether we're partnering with community colleges or industry. And there are many that need within their own organizations to have this continuous training, whether you're a large city or a major nonprofit or a big company or even a smaller company.
Mhm. So, I mean, I hear when people talk about sort of AI's impact on work in the, near future,
Right.
they talk a lot about how, AI can be a very, very speedy and useful intern or entry level employee, right?
Right,
Like
everybody's admin assistant.
exactly.
Mhm.
You talked about coding. It
Yes,
can write code
right.
when given direction.
Yes,
If you're at a law firm, it can maybe do some of that paralegal work or
that's
that
right.
that early kind of work and sort of reviewing documents
The legal
and all that
assistant
kind of
work, yes.
exactly. What it's not quite there yet on is making big strategic decisions and everything
That's
like
right.
that. So how does the education system adjust for that world?
The One of the ways that the education system needs to adjust for that world is really focusing on the critical thinking skills
Mhm.
of students,
Mhm.
right? So, you may be a financial analyst, but it's no longer there are no more Excel spreadsheets, right?
Mhm.
You have AI, and you need those higher level critical thinking skills to do the analysis. You may be a coder, but you're coding at a different level because AI is doing we'll call it fundamental coding, right?
Mhm.
Um, you may be a paralegal, but you are now needing to think at that higher level. And so that is really what is so important, those analytical skills, those critical thinking skills, being nimble. Also, there are various situations where AI does not, and I don't think ever will have the capabilities. And that's, for instance, if empathy is required,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
If it's a situation with a doctor, or a lawyer, or a teacher, an educator, where you have to have those people skills, the empathy, leadership within organizations.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. And So I guess here's my last question. How confident do you feel in the state's ability to get this right this session? How this feels like a complicated issue. It feels like there's a lot of nuance, a lot of expertise needed. Is the Texas legislature equipped to end in a good place in early June?
Texas legislature has dealt, is dealing, and will deal with in the future a lot of very complicated issues. And I think that the process is set up. It's set up, frankly, to kill bills, not to
Yeah.
pass them. I say visualize the Summer Olympics with those people who are running the hurdles one after another. So the system is set up really to vet bills, to get input, to have amendments, to have discussion, to get to a place where people feel comfortable.
All right. Well, we will watch and see what happens.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Rob and Chris. A reminder, the Texas Tribune membership program is participating in Amplify Austin this week. Please check out our website if you would like to donate and contribute. Eleanor and James will be back next week, and we'll see you then.